Welcome back to Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm Ollie Hayes, and today I'm going to be talking all things Sean Dyche, the good, the bad, the ugly, during his 23 months in charge of Everton Football Club. So, obviously, as we've turned the page on a new chapter of Everton, David Moyes has been announced as the new manager of the football club. Why not bring you a video talking about Sean Dyche and his 23 months at Everton? And we'll start with my thoughts on the sacking. How it was handled by the club. I think sacked 3 hours before the Peterborough game. It was pretty crazy. It came completely out of the blue. Obviously, everyone was expecting Sean Dyche and his team to take that game on Thursday night against Peterborough in the FA Cup. With him actually taking the press conference before the game, everyone expected that Sean Dyche would still be in his post, and you were looking at the Villa game and the Tottenham game as two massive games for him to try and keep his job. But no, he was sacked 3 hours before kickoff. It clearly been rumbling for a few days. This one, what's coming out now in the press about Sean Dyche and how he was potentially, negotiating settlement packages and things like that. It was clearly rumbling. And if you look back at the Peterborough press conference, for example, you can kind of tell that it is in the offing. You look at his body language, you look at the way he's talking. It does seem like massively that he is on his way out, especially after that Bournemouth defeat. It had clearly been brewing. So, you know, yeah, it's not the greatest of ways that he left. It's clear that something had gone on because if you look at the statement, for example, it was a complete polar opposite to what Frank Lampard got when he was sacked from the football club. There was no real thanks for Sean Dyche or his team. It was just Sean Dyche has left the football club and that was it. And, yeah, it is a mad way to sack a manager, but there's clearly been something going on behind the scenes and, it clearly been rumbling for a few days. But as I said before, I'm going to break down his 23 months in charge of Everton Football Club, and we'll start with the good things because contrary to popular belief and what a lot of people thought about Sean Dyche coming to the end of his tenure at Everton, there were a few good things that he did at the football club. And if you cast our minds back to January 2023, when he did come to the football club at the back end of that transfer window, it did seem like a perfect match at the time. Obviously, Frank Lampard had left the club; he left us in a very difficult situation. And the January transfer window in 2023 was, it was even more bleak towards the end there. It's sort of the Arnaut Danjuma saga, for example, where he was practically in an Everton shirt and then ended up going on a plane down to London and signing for Tottenham Hotspur. So if you look at when he came in, it was obviously a really turbulent time for the club. I think we were in the bottom three at that point. We just lost 2-0 away at West Ham. And, me being in that away end down there at West Ham, it did feel like we were really, really in the mire. We were really struggling. It looked like our first relegation in so many years was on the cards. And yeah, Sean Dyche came in. It felt like he was the right man at the time, and that first game against Arsenal at Goodison Park, it definitely proved that. There was high intensity. We got at Arsenal. A lot of people that had tarred Sean Dyche with the brush that it was completely defensive football. You know, it didn't really seem like that, did it? He set us up well that afternoon, and against all the odds, we beat Arsenal, who were challenging for the league title that season. So that one, it did show that it was a right match at the time, and Dyche did set us up well at times, especially in that second half of that season. He set us up well. There was a lot of stability going into games. We weren't conceding a lot of goals, but yeah, I think keeping us up in that season, after Frank Lampard, it was it was really good to see, and it showed that Sean Dyche did have the ilk of a top manager and a manager that could set up teams to defend really well, but also score goals on the counter attack or from set pieces. And that first season, that first 6 months that he had in the job, it showed that he was a really solid manager and keeping us up against all the odds on the last day against Bournemouth, managing to get the result there with a great strike from Abdoulaye Doucouré. He was one of the players that really flourished under Sean Dyche, for example, completely out of favour under Frank Lampard, but did flourish under Sean Dyche. So it is worth mentioning that first 6 months, and then also the second season, the first full season under Sean Dyche. It's worth mentioning the stability that we had there, getting to 48 points, 2 points deductions in that season, completely unprecedented, completely unheard of. So for Sean Dyche to take that on the chin and deal with it how he did, in such a turbulent year for the football club, it does, you do need to give him some credit, getting to 48 points and getting us way away from the relegation battle and away from the relegation zone. That does deserve some credit. Although, there was 3 or 4 months without a victory in that, and a 6-0 defeat down at Chelsea, which I was, fortunate enough to be in the away end for that one and seeing that one unfold. credit where credit is due. Sean Dyche did do well last season to get us to 48 points and a fantastic Merseyside derby win included in that season. My first in my lifetime actually seeing a Merseyside derby in person, a Merseyside derby win in person was under Sean Dyche. So that's a fond memory which I'll hold. But that was really about as good as his tenure got as Everton boss, and it did all seem to unravel at the start of this current season now. So I'll move on to where it went wrong, really, and we have to start with his tactics for Sean Dyche. The way he set up in games was so negative, even at home. If you look at the way he set up, it was just to soak up pressure so much and just try and score a goal at any cost. And last season, for example, it did work because we scored a lot of set pieces, we scored a lot of goals on the break. But this season, it felt so much worse. It felt like we'd really regressed to the point where we couldn't create chances going forward. It looked like we hadn't been coached to go forward at all under Sean Dyche, and chances were few and far between. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, for example, got really frustrated in that setup because playing like that week in, week out, it's going to take its toll because if you're getting two or three chances a game, for example, you're expected to take at least one of them. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin, bang out of form, bang out of confidence, wasn't taking those chances. So it probably got, really difficult for a striker in that system. And the calls that it was just the players no longer had any substance for me because, the metrics that were backing up Sean Dyche towards, the start of his first full season in charge, when we had Neil Maupay up front, for example, in that Wolves and the Fulham game, where, we created so many chances, but lost both games 1-0. A lot of people were hanging by those stats and saying, yeah, we've got to stick with Sean Dyche because, the metrics are all there. We're going to start winning games, eventually. And it did happen. The metrics did come true, so to speak, and the metrics did back up the performances and we managed to start winning games and putting performances together. But this season, that all went completely out the window. The shots, chance creation, whatever you want to call it, it was next to nothing. And, getting one, two shots maybe a game, it's not going to work for a Sean Dyche team. So, the calls that it was just the players and the players can't finish the chances, they no longer had any substance this season. And according to the Athletic as well, this isn't just, the fan opinion as well. According to the Athletic, many of the players felt that they lacked the tactical guidance under Sean Dyche and complained that they were being set up to fail. And this really transpired on the pitch for me. So many times we saw it that the players were really unhappy with the way they were being set up and the way they were being told to play. I've mentioned it many, many times in different reviews or, different extra time reviews on this channel that I saw the body language of players like Jordan Pickford or Jarrad Branthwaite or James Tarkowski, and they were being told to lump it long, so many times. And Jordan Pickford, many a time, had shouted at the bench and showed, discontent towards the bench that he wasn't comfortable doing that. They wanted to try and play. They felt like they were being backed into a corner by Sean Dyche's tactics. And so many times I saw it, even this season, for example, Pickford losing his head because he's been told to lump it long towards Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and then Dominic Calvert-Lewin losing his head a little bit because he's having to try and, control the ball and being hung out to dry against two huge centre halves in many different teams. You look at the likes of Fulham, for example, they dealt with Dominic Calvert-Lewin really well. So for me, it did feel like the players kind of felt that, the tactics were, setting them up to fail. And obviously, as per the Athletic, after Dyche has left, this has turned out to be quite true. And under Dyche, it just became a chore to watch the football by the end, didn't it? So many times where I've been so up for the football in recent years and so much wanting to go, that completely eradicated under Sean Dyche because for the first time in years, me as a fan, I didn't want to go to the football. I felt like it was just a chore watching Everton, and I think a lot of the attacking players in that team probably felt like it was a chore too. I think the Athletic also mentioned that some attacking players felt that they were completely isolated and they had far too many defensive responsibilities. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I've mentioned him a lot, but also Iliman and Jai. I think he's a player that he's worked so hard this season and he's put in a lot of decent performances, but his star quality, his absolute magic on the ball, we need to see that unlocked more. And Sean Dyche was maybe putting him in too much of a defensive mindset that we can't really see that too often in his performances. And that's the tactics, I think, is probably one of the main reasons why it went wrong for Sean Dyche. I think if I'm looking at the biggest sticking point for his tenure, it does have to be the tactics. But there was a few other things along the way that didn't help Sean Dyche. Losing some key players, for example, that didn't help. Amadou Onana is a name that probably springs to mind. Losing him during Sean Dyche's tenure, I think that's probably one that many people will say was a difficult thing for Sean Dyche. Although Dyche didn't actually rate him that much. I think towards the back end of Amadou Onana's time at Everton, I don't think he started many games at all. If you're looking at the majority of games where we did put in good performances towards the back end of last season. That didn't include Amadou Onana. I'm thinking of the Merseyside derby, for example. So I think on his day, Amadou Onana was a top player. Maybe the attitude wasn't fully there, and he wasn't fully committed to buying into a Sean Dyche system, for example. But I do think there was a top player in there. And towards the start of this season, for example, his start that he had at Aston Villa, it does show that that there is a real raw top player in there. They just need to maybe nurture him a little bit more and to see that grow in years to come. But interestingly, Dyche didn't really like him and didn't really rate him in that one. But for me personally, I do think he was a top player and maybe wasn't utilised to his full potential or to his full ability under Sean Dyche. But off the pitch as well, talking about on the pitch players that he lost off the pitch as well. There were some changes to the staff, which probably didn't work in his favour and didn't help him. Losing Alan Kelly, who was the goalkeeper coach. I think Jordan Pickford, was really close to Alan Kelly and held, a really good relationship with Alan Kelly. So to lose him, I think that may have taken a little bit of an adverse effect on Jordan Pickford, but also Alex Scanlon. That really showed as well. Alex Scanlon was the set piece analyst for Sean Dyche, and obviously we lost him in the summer. So you can notice a real drop off this season in the set pieces, obviously conceding a lot more, not scoring as many. And I'm talking about Sean Dyche in a team that we were so defensively solid last season, and then in his first 6 months in that first half season that he had, we were so defensively solid, and we were also scoring goals from set pieces. Once you take that away, and you're not scoring goals from set pieces, what does Sean Dyche really have to offer? What is the benefit of having Sean Dyche in the post? It doesn't really offer any positives going forward if you have Sean Dyche and we're not scoring any set pieces. So I do think that's maybe hindered Sean Dyche this season a lot, is losing the set piece analyst, and it has showed. It's transpired on the pitch, in my opinion, because we're conceding a lot more set pieces, but also we're not scoring set pieces anymore. And a team like that Sean Dyche likes to set up, they score goals from set pieces, and they score them aplenty. And when you take that out of Sean Dyche's game, there's no real positive of having him in post. So that's probably one of his one of the main reasons that Sean Dyche came unstuck this season is probably due to the set pieces drying up, but also he doesn't really help himself with his team selection at times. His favoritism of certain players. I think a lot of people will know the name I'm about to mention next. It's obviously Michael Keane. If you're looking at Sean Dyche's first full season, I think it was actually Sheffield United away at the start of September, where Jarrad Branthwaite actually first came into the team. So all the games in August in Dyche's first full season, Michael Keane was actually starting, and then Jarrad Branthwaite came in from September. This one, I just think he doesn't help himself, Sean Dyche, in this one. It was clear that he had his favourite players. You look at this season, for example, playing Dwight McNeil centrally. It worked for one game, but did it work for many other games after that? I don't think it did. But he carried on persisting with it because he was more fond of Dwight McNeil maybe than he was Iliman Ndiaye, playing him in the centre. He wanted Dwight McNeil in that central position, so he persisted with it. And the favouritism did show many, many times during Sean Dyche's tenure at Everton. And the Branthwaite one, for me, he's our biggest asset. He's probably a 70, 80 million pound centre half, and leaving him on the bench. Listen, no disrespect to Michael Keane. I think Michael Keane does a job. He's probably not a top end centre half in the Premier League. He may be low to mid-table centre half material in the Premier League or top end Championship. It does remain to be seen, but Branthwaite is, the sky's the limit for that boy. He's our biggest asset. Not playing him does so much, wrong to the balance of the team, and it's detrimental to how solid we are. This season as well, obviously Branthwaite, had a little bit of a spell out of the team. He was in and out of the team with injury, but Michael Keane, again, is a player that kept his place for a lot of this season. I look at Ipswich away, for example, Branthwaite not featuring there. I know we did win the game, but Branthwaite not featuring there could have been detrimental to our season because, one place between Everton and Ipswich, if that game goes a different way, we're currently sat here in the bottom three. So, I think Dyche's favouritism to certain players did hinder the squad and did hinder performances a lot. And it was clear to see that he did have his favourites in that team. But that's really everything about on the pitch and on Dyche with the squad and how he set us up. But there's another key aspect of Dyche's tenure, which I think I'd be silly not to mention. And it's Dyche's mannerisms with the fans, really, and Dyche's relationship with the Evertonians. And for me, it did feel like Dyche always wanted to seem like he was above us. And, he wanted to seem like he was doing us a favour by being the Everton manager. And listen, I've talked about it already in this video and talked about the situation we were in under Frank Lampard and how much of a dire situation we were in at that point. And it did feel like a match made in heaven at that point because Dyche, he is known as a firefighter manager. He's known to take teams from the bottom end of the table and solidify them. So at that point, yeah, I can understand that it did feel like a match made in heaven. But for me, he's always felt like he's been above us. He always feels like he, you know, that we owe him one for being the Everton manager and how he handled himself in some conferences, I think was nothing short of embarrassing at times. I think, the way he spoke down about the club, he would often make snide little comments here and there about the fans or, the club or about the size of the club and, dubious digs at the fans. They did him no favours. And, I'm talking about these dubious digs. For me, Brighton at home was a key example of this. The sort of comments that he'd maybe make and they'd be left open to interpretation by the fans. Some fans would take them as, the reality of where we are, whereas other fans would take them as, a little bit of a dig. I think at times I did feel like it was a little bit of a dig at the fans. I'm thinking about Brighton at home, for example. He talked about the empty seats and talked about the Everton fans leaving when, we were 3-0 down and certain digs like that. They didn't really help him and they didn't really help him bond with the Evertonians. And that's why I think maybe a lot of Evertonians didn't take to him as much and didn't want him to succeed. And that's, really why he came unstuck with the fans towards the end of his tenure because, we felt like he was talking down to us. We felt like he thought he was above us. And Brighton, for example, at the start of the season, that was one that I personally, I thought it was a dig, and I thought he was digging us out as fans for leaving early. But his comments also about the last season at Goodison, that did him no favours, really. Saying that the fans expected a big, perfect season for a huge send off at the Grand Old Lady at Goodison. We never expected that as fans. We just wanted stability going into the last season at Goodison, get to Bramley Moore Dock, the new stadium, as a Premier League club. We would have been happy with that as fans. No one was talking about Europe, no one was talking about anything. Probably above 10th place. I think a lot of Evertonians, we want better for the club. We do, of course we do. We want to be fighting in Europe. We want to be fighting for titles. We want to be fighting for trophies here and there. But every Evertonian was realistic going into this season for me. We were completely realistic about our chances. We just wanted to survive. We wanted stability. We maybe wanted a mid-table finish, and we would have been happy with that going into the new stadium. Obviously, fingers crossed with new ownership. Obviously, that is now over the line, so we do have new owners and just debt free. Looking to turn the page on a new chapter for the football club. No one expected a massive send off of fighting for a league title, going for Europe. No one expected that. So I think Dyche did himself no favors by maybe poking at the fans and digging the fans out for maybe thinking that or putting words in our mouth saying that we were thinking that because we just wanted stability. We just wanted to win a few football games and push on and just progressively get better as a football club and build on the 48 points we got last season. But if you're looking at the current form and the 19 games that Sean Dyche took charge of this season, we were going to get nowhere near the 48 points we got last season. So it felt like we regressed as a football club, and that's why Evertonians were so annoyed at times by the performances. We weren't expecting anything more than that. We just wanted better performances and maybe to equal or better slightly the 48 points that we got last season. So I think that's why Dyche, again, maybe didn't bond too well with the Everton fans towards the end of his tenure. And not to mention his buzzwords. Obviously, there was plenty of buzzwords that Dyche liked to use in his press conferences. He liked on the grass, the feel. That's just scratching the surface of the buzzwords that Dyche liked to use in his press conference. And I think a lot of Evertonians got fed up with that. But all in all, with Dyche's relationship with the fans, it did feel like he thought he was doing us a bit of a favour. And obviously, the size of Everton, that should never be the case. No manager is bigger than this football club. Yeah, okay, we've been in turmoil for the last few years. We've had a few very difficult years as Evertonians, but the size of this football club is absolutely huge, and no manager should feel like they're doing us a favour being the manager of this football club, and that should never be the case. And I do genuinely think that the reason why a lot of Evertonians didn't take to Sean Dyche was because of this, because he thought he was above us and thought he was a lot more doing us a lot more of a favour than he actually was. So that's all on my thoughts about Dyche's relationship with the fans. But we might as well look at the new chapter. Obviously, I mentioned it at the start of this video about David Moyes, and he is the obviously the new manager. That's confirmed by the club that he is the new manager now, and he took his first press conference today as the new Everton manager. And the biggest takeaways from that, he recognises that the first six, obviously the first fix to cause. The first fix to getting over the problems that we've had in recent seasons and in recent months is just to win football games and get the team to score more goals. Obviously, it's easier said than done. We have been very, very poor recently, and the squad did look completely lackluster, completely out of ideas. So obviously he's going to have to tweak a few things and maybe shore us up at the back, but also he's going to have to utilise the likes of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, whether he can put his arm around Dominic Calvert-Lewin and potentially get him to either stay a little bit longer or sort his future out. That remains to be seen. But if there is anyone that can put an arm around a player, it is David Moyes. He is very good at man management. So yeah, he's a steady pair of hands. He'll hold a decent relationship with the fans. He won't think he's above us. That's for certain. And it already feels to me like he feels grateful for the opportunity to be back at the club. It never did feel like this for Sean Dyche. It never felt like that. So I think Moyes, we know what he is. He's not going to be a huge, expansive manager. He's a steady pair of hands. He's going to do a job. He's going to come in and do a job. Fingers crossed he can get us on the straight and narrow, pushing up the league table. But in my opinion, it was so refreshing to listen to Sean Dyche. It makes me so up to Sean Dyche. It was so refreshing to listen to David Moyes in his press conference today. Talking about the Villa game, looking ahead to it, but also talking about the longer term plans of Everton Football Club. It does make me so optimistic for the future. And fingers crossed we can turn this new page, turn this new chapter of the football club, and just fingers crossed we can start pushing up the league, getting more decent performances and just maybe one day fighting for that trophy, fighting for Europe or fighting for league titles. But that is all for my thoughts today on Sean Dyche and also David Moyes coming into the club. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think I was maybe a little bit a bit harsh on Dyche's tenure? Obviously, I think a lot of people maybe wanted to see Sean Dyche leave in the summer and just get to Bramley Moore and that be the sort of natural end of his contract, that 2.5 year contract that he did sign in January of 2023. That be the natural end, but obviously it didn't get to there. Have I been too kind to Sean Dyche in places? Have I been too harsh? Let me know your thoughts in the comments about his tenure and what you're thinking about his tenure. And also let me know your thoughts in the comments about David Moyes coming into the football club, and are you excited for the future and the next 6 months of David Moyes, and then whatever may be beyond this 6 months for David Moyes. But that is all from me today. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon.